All right, layer number 2, we're going to dive into the mind of a coach and unpack each one of those pieces of the progression. So the first thing we have to go over is the stance. Now, as you look at a stance, you need to be looking at their feet because that's the main thing that we need to see. So eyes go to the feet, and the stance that we're looking for is the heels in relation to the shoulders. Now, people, depending on what they've done previously or kind of their natural comfortable stances, will go to different places here. But what you're going to say is just say, hey, I want your heels under your shoulders. Now, for her, it's right about there. That might be a little narrow, a little bit wider for me, Connie. And once again, my eyeballs are going at this heel in relation to the shoulder. The next thing we also have to look at in stance is where the toes are. So people, again, are going to take a natural position based off of what they've done previously or what they see you do. They might mimic that. But generally what we want them to do is take a slightly turned out position. We just don't want to look at it and see it too far turned out or dead straight. That slightly turned out position is a good place for most people to start, where over time they might change that up. But we want to make sure that they have the room to rotate the femur in the bottom, allow range for the hip, and squat all the way down. So we look at the heels under the shoulders and then the foot position. So eyes are going to the feet, making sure those two things are adjusted. And that is our stance. Next thing we do is the piece of progression talking about the weight in the foot. Now again, if we're looking at the weight in the foot, the eyes have to go to the feet. But what we want here is balance about the foot with a slight emphasis towards the heel. So we need to be on the side, need to be able to see where they're moving in their foot, and we need to make sure that they understand that the full foot stays on the ground the entire time. So she's in that good stance position, and anytime you've already coached one thing, you can always revisit back to that. She narrowed her stance up, but I'm gonna be okay with this right here. I'll take it there. I see you, Connie, going after it. Now, we want that toe slightly toed out, same sort of deal. Now I'm going to look at the weight balance about her foot, and generally what I'll have her do here is I'll have her rock forward, all the way into her toes, and then rock back, all the way back into her heels, almost falling over backwards. Go ahead and relax, and then I'll say I don't want you in either of those two places. That gives her a sense of what too far forward is. It also gives her a sense of what too far back is, but then it also gives me a visual of what it looks like when she's too far forward and what it looks like when she's too far back. So I look at her body position in relation to where the weight is in her foot and make sure she's balanced there. If nothing else, I'll have her grab the ground with her big toe and then lean back a little bit. So it's a balance about the foot, but with a little bit of an emphasis towards the heel. Now I look at this at the start, but then I also have to make sure she maintains this throughout the entire lift. So I say lift, squat. So when I say down, she'll go down. When I say up, she'll come up. My eyes are going to the weight in the foot, and I'll say down. Oh, I see no movement there. Maybe a little wiggle of the toes, and then up. Good. And that was pretty darn balanced. Now what often happens is as people go down for the first time, they'll want to shoot their weight to the front of the foot. So as she goes down, you'll see that weight shifting forward. And she's got super flexy ankles, so she was almost able to get away with that. But my eyes start to see this weight shifting here. Go ahead and stand on up. Now, as we do something like this, we have to go, okay, why is this happening? Why is the weight shifting? Does she just not know where she is in space? Or maybe it's an initiation issue. So if I go up the body and look at her hips, do the same one that you just did where you shoot your knees forward. So you see how she was shooting her knees forward? She was actually initiating incorrectly. Go ahead and stand. Now, initiation of the movement is actually one of the things we could teach, but it generally sorts itself out. And what we want to do here is focus on the weight in the foot, and if the initiation goes wrong, go, okay, let's go ahead and make sure those hips get sent back. So if she's pushing the knee forward, which could be the case, we say, can you sit back into it? And then she can go down. So we just look at the hips in relation to the foot and look at that balance there. So we've got these hips and feet, they're all looking good, and then stand back up. So eyes were going to the foot. We saw the movement in the foot. We had to address, okay, what's going on here? Move up the chain, and we see something going on a little bit above it. So the main point that we were teaching was just the weight in the foot, but we have to go why, and then for her, it was an initiation thing. Could be other things, could just be balance issues, could be maybe her stance is too narrow and she needs to widen up her stance. She could just not know where she is in space, but eyes go to the foot, and we address that and unpack that. Next part of the progression, we have the knees. We have to keep those 2 points we just went over, but the knees we want tracking over the toe. And there's two things we want to look at for the knee. Number one is making sure that it's tracking over the toe, and two is going to be the effort that she uses to get it there. So eyes go to the knee in relation to the toe. So as she goes down, she maintains all these points she had before, but we're looking to make sure that the knee is tracking over the toe. In this case, Connie has her knee tracking over her toe. Go ahead and stand back up. But what you'll also notice with Connie is she's not trying super hard. She's just holding it there just over her foot. So if she goes down, does the same thing. She goes down, is just over her toe. If I say push your knees out more, oh, you see how much harder she's trying there? Look at that. She's got far more effort. She's even smiling and enjoying herself. Go ahead and stand. So my coach's eye was like, wow, that looks like a good position. But I could get more work from her. And I want that. I want her to be working harder because what that does is it's turning on the glute, it's using more musculature, and she's actually building a better position. So we want her actively driving out. So not only do we need to look at the knee in relation to the toe, we also need to look at effort. Some people will actually have barely their knee tracking their toe, but their effort will be enormous. Other people will be able to track the knee over the toe no problem, but you ask them to push out, and it can move like another 3 inches, and you're like, that's the effort I was looking for, because that's turning on the glute. Now, where this can go wrong is if you ask them to push out and they go out too far. So they go down to the bottom, they go to push their knees out, and their feet start to lift. And she did it naturally when I said too far. Go ahead and stand. What we need to have is that balance about the foot, just like we talked about before. We don't want too far, we don't want not far enough. But in the case of too far out, the knee will start to lift the foot off the ground. If that's the case, just say, hey, take your big toe, grab the ground with your big toe, and do the same thing. So she'll do the same effort, but she'll make sure the foot stays planted, and then you've just kind of sorted that problem out. Now the other thing that can go wrong is the knee caving in, and this is far more common, where she goes down to the bottom and your eyes see something like this, where the knee's caving in. We have to go back to the process of, okay, why is the knee caving in? Maybe it's her stance. Maybe, it's her femur, maybe all kinds of weird stuff. Oftentimes it's because they're lazy or they're not paying attention, and you're like, hey, push your knee out. And you're like, whoa, you did it? Thanks for trying this time. Go ahead and stand back up. So we have to look at what's going wrong. How can I address that? Go for the simplest thing first, push the knee out, see if you can get it tracking over the toe. But that's where our eyes go in this piece of the progression, while still maintaining those other points we talked about before. Next thing we have is the range of motion. That's hip crease going clearly below the knee. Where we need to look for this as a coach is eyes on her hips in relation to the knee. So as she goes down, we need to make sure that if I look at this, there's no question about it if that hip is below the knee. Go ahead and stand back up. Now this is a place where you might get as a coach, and all of a sudden they can't. They hit there and they're like, oh, what do I do? And in order for them to go lower, they're going to need to change something. And oftentimes that comes with the stance. Maybe you didn't catch it earlier and they took too short a stance or too narrow a stance. So as they're going down, is jamming their femur in their hip. Or maybe their feet are too straight. So all of a sudden they're trying to go down and they can't go any deeper. But we need to address that now, and this is the place to do so. So you might have to widen their stance up. You might have to turn their feet out. Connie's super mobile. That's no issue for her. But you as a coach are going to run into places where you're like, dang, I got to this part of the progression. I got them doing everything else. I can't get them down there. Number one thing to go to is the stance. Adjust width. Some people might have to even go narrower. Maybe they're too wide. So stance is something you can modify to hit other points of performance and revisit back to that place. So she goes down, my eyes go, hip clearly going below the knee, bang, she's got it. Now I have to then check those other points. Is the knee tracking the toe? Is the weight balanced about the foot? Nailed it. Go ahead and stand back up. So that's the range of motion piece. We have to get this. Ask for as much as you can from the athlete, but only, once again, attack the things that you've already coached. You haven't taught the lumbar curve yet, so you can actually let them sacrifice that for this part of this progression. So get that range, show them where that is. If they can hit it once, it means they can hit it multiple times, and always request that they do so. So that's the range of motion piece. Let's move on to arguably the most important piece. We're going to go over the neutral spine, or maintaining lumbar curve. Go ahead and turn sideways for me. Cool. So this is her standing tall. This is her, well, as tall as she can be. This is her maintaining a nice neutral lumbar curve, so this natural S curvature of the spine. She's flexing her abs against her erectors here to make sure she's not bending and moving around. This position should be maintained throughout the entirety of the movement. So if we eyes as a coach go to this low back here, she goes down, and she stands back up. There's no excessive movement, rounding, flexing, anything of this spine. So once again, eyes are going right to this low back. She goes down. We're seeing this, and we're like, wow, she maintained it. Yippity-doo-dah, skippity-day. Go ahead and stand back up. We also then unpack all of the other pieces. That's being hit. great, let's go to the knees. Great, let's go to the range. Great, let's go to the feet. And you make sure that everything else is also being hit. Now, it doesn't usually happen, go ahead and relax, where we just tell people to go below parallel and maintain that lumbar and it works. We often have to have some sort of a cue to get them there. For me, the reason I teach this last is because I needed to build all that other foundation beforehand before I'm going to talk to them about that spine. Because if I teach them the spine first, they tend to want to just focus on that, and it's really hard to get them into the other positions. So other people teach it different ways. This is a good progression, and this is the progression that you guys are learning right now. So as she stands here, we're going to have her start in that position. I'm going to have her put her hands out zombie style out front. And then as she goes down, I'm going to ask her to pull her hands over her head. Now this is going to force her chest up, which is going to make her back tighter. So as she goes down, she pulls her hands up over her head, pulls her hands up over her head. Nice! And she maintains that nice neutral spine, then stands back up. Now what often happens is when we try to address this position, they'll make sacrifices in those other points of performance. So I want you on this next one to watch what her weight does in her feet as she tries to do this. You know the one where you shoot the knees forward and go into the toes? Show them that one. So she goes here and she's trying to she's like, yeah, my chest is up. Look how high my chest is up. It's so up right now. But she lost that weight in the foot position. So if your eyes go down to her feet, you're like, uh-oh, go ahead and stand back up. Now, that's hard because there's this balance that we have to have of maintaining the weight in the foot while fighting for that upright chest. And again, this is one of those places where we really want effort. We want them fighting for a better, more upright chest. But for some people, that might be immature. And immature just means it doesn't have much uprightness. It's going to be a little bit flatter. So she'll still have a flat back, but it's going to be a little bit more flat to the ground. Do you know how to do an immature squat? I don't know. Let's try it. So drop on down there. So with the athlete who's in that way up in that toe, yeah, there we go. Now lift your hands up over your head. Yeah, there we go. So for Connie, she could actually sit more upright. Can you try to sit more upright where your normal squat? So see how she sits more upright, she pushes her knees forward. It's because she's got good ankle flexibility and she's good to go. But if she pushes her knees back, yeah, and drops her chest a little but still keeps the back flat, her chest is falling down, but her back is still flat. This is a little bit of immaturity. Go ahead and stand. That's slight. A lot of people will have a really big amount of immaturity, and depending on their leg length and their torso length, that might also just change. If you got longer legs and a shorter torso, you tend to see a bit more of an immature squat. Little shorter legs, little longer torso, it looks a little bit more upright. But what we're looking for is as upright as the person can be, and again, we're looking for effort. So as a coach, I'm like, hey, are they trying really hard, or are they just chilling? Because if they're just chilling, they need to work harder. They can be in a better position. We can fight for more range or more strength or more whatever they need in order to make sure that this is the best possible squat. So at this point, you've laid on those other points. You can't sacrifice any of them, but we still need to fight for the best possible position. So that's where we go. That's the entire squat. And all of those little pieces layered on each other are going to be our unpacked little coach's progression as we go through it. Thank you for watching, and if you found that helpful and you want more of this kind of content, we have literally hundreds of videos just like this, from practical tips and tricks to theory to everything in between, all in the knowledge. And if you want to learn from me directly and our cohort of level 4 staff members, then we also have the Knowledge Pro, which we do weekly calls and live interaction and homework and everything else in between. If you want any more information or would like to have a free trial of the knowledge, please click the link in the description below and get after it.